Hey guys, welcome to the MOV podcast by Guch. This is episode 11, uh, and today's guest we've brought in someone who is an expert at demand gen. We've not touched upon this topic in our previous podcast, so we wanted to like really get into like how videos can help demand generation, and like somebody who's actually good at this, who's been doing this throughout their career. So without much ado, I think I'll add the guest to the podcast, and please welcome Matt Fleming from Loadsmart. That is Matt for you guys. How are
Hey,
you, Matt?
I'm doing great. Thanks for having me. How about you?
I'm doing really well. So it is
Awesome.
it is 11:30 p.m. in India. So you might
Hustle,
see
man. You're hustling.
so you might see a little bit of the this thing tiredness on my face, but then you know that I'm really excited. I've been behind you to come on the podcast for a while now.
Yeah.
So
Hey, I'm happy to be here. Thank you for having me. And also, this topic is going to be fun to talk about. So I'm
yeah.
looking forward to it.
Absolutely, absolutely. So, briefly, I think if you could introduce yourself and just tell me a little bit about your role as the director of marketing at Loadsmart.
Sure. Yeah, my name's Matt Fleming. Pretty much spent my entire career in early to growth stage tech startups. And at Loadsmart, I lead marketing at Loadsmart. So I lead a small team that's really looking at all the ways that we can kind of drive growth at the company. Um, in a nutshell, that's essentially what I do.
Right. Uh, and that said, like I happen to like skim through your LinkedIn. I was trying to find out the topics that you generally talk about, the topics that you are very passionate about, what you've been practicing throughout the career, and like I've seen that one area of expertise that has come out from all the roles that you've served in your career is demand generation.
Yeah.
And I really want to talk about demand generation. But before that, I just want you to touch upon what is demand generation. What is the main difference between lead generation and demand generation?
Ooh, that's good. So I think demand generation comes one step before lead generation, right? Like I think, people think, hey, we'll just throw up some paid ads, right? Throw up some ads on Google Display, on search, social, all that stuff, right? And that is capturing demand that's already out there, right? Like it's not manufacturing demand, it's not building demand, it's capturing demand. So when you start talking about demand generation, it's actually honestly like one step even before someone fills out a lead. At least in my head, it's how do
Right.
you kind of build awareness and activate and educate the market so that there is demand for what you're whether that's a lead offer or whatever it might be, right? But I
Yeah.
see them as kind of two different steps.
Right. So it's about creating market. It's about creating awareness for people who don't know that they need such a solution. They have certain problems. So it's also explaining or creating awareness around like problem statements which are not so like not so evident.
Yeah, I think so. Yes, I think the other thing that kind of comes into it, it's even beyond, because I think a lot of people start thinking demand, right, and they immediately start thinking, oh, well, it's like, product centric videos or stuff like that. All stuff that's all about me, right? And I think that's one of the mistakes a lot of companies kind of make is it's so inwardly focused that it's like, it's not great content. You're not building awareness, you're not building demand. So I think, when I think about kind of demand generation, it is not just about kind of providing great content, right? And maybe content that helps build awareness for kind of the category or the problem that you guys solve. But I think as much as it's doing that, it's also building a connection with those people. And it's funny, like people don't buy from companies, they buy from people, right?
Yeah.
And that's one of the reasons, and we can get into this, right, that I love video, because like it is the best, most cost efficient way to try and build a connect, not just awareness, but a connection with the people that you actually want to sell to.
Yeah. True, true. Because you brought out the topic, let's dive in straight. So I want to know how Loadsmart uses videos for their business for different purposes.
Yep.
I have a few videos that we can talk through as well, that we can play. And you can maybe tell me, we can go into the depths of why you create each type of video, right? The
Sure.
first one I'd like to play is from your weekly recap show hosted by one of your colleagues.
Oh boy.
I'll dive straight into that.
I'm scared. Which one is it?
Grab your sweaters and put on your tea kettle because we're stepping into fall. Coming out of the holiday week, volume saw their traditional decrease, but jumped back into line with current trends. Rejections consistently decreased through last week. Don't be fooled by these decreases. Volume is still at record levels. Major markets still sit at 20% rejections, and rates are at all-time highs. Sally made landfall early in the week as a Category 2 hurricane. Capacity was limited within southern Louisiana and Alabama, as capacity was allocated away from the storm.
So yeah, this looks like I mean this is a piece that I have not seen very often companies putting out. This looks like a like a news item that he's doing. It's like in like this is like CNBC, CNN.
I'm flattered. That's awesome. Our content guy Aaron, who came up with it, he'd love that compliment. But yeah, no, that's definitely the intent.
Right.
Yeah. So yeah, I can talk. Yeah, you want me just to kind of talk about it a little bit?
Yeah, please tell me, like, why do you do this particular piece of content? And this is something that you all do every week. So
Yep.
I want to know, like, why so much attention is put. And before that, I think just to set context for the viewers, because if you could tell a little bit about Loadsmart, because then it would make more sense about talking about trends that affect your business.
Yeah, absolutely. So Loadsmart is a technology company that helps shippers large and small move their freight across the country more efficiently. And really the way we do that is by using technologies like artificial intelligence, machine learning, to essentially automate tasks that would be a better fit for a computer, or, basically than a human, right? So we generate lots of data, right? And our customers on both sides, both the shippers we get freight from and the carriers who we're hoping to get to move that freight, understanding what's happening in the market is crucial. Now, if you're a larger shipper, right, you probably have different data sources that you're already getting this information from. But the other thing is, on the smaller side, number one, like they don't have access to those tools, right? A lot of them don't. But two, it's also putting context around it, right? So like our operations team, which Jordan, who you just met, represents, they literally have their finger on the pulse of what's happening in the market. So who better to provide context around the data that maybe some of these guys have access to than, our own operations team. And then the other point I was going to make there is we're a super small team. We are 3 people, right? Including me, plus a couple contractors. So what that means is that when we think about video and we think about content, we need to think about ways to do it as low effort as humanly possible, right? Like it needs to be repeatable, it needs to be scalable, it needs to be easy. So one of the things we realized was, man, our operations team is essentially, not in a video format, right? But they're giving these data points and this context to the entire company on a weekly basis already. And this content is also probably pretty valuable to external audiences. How can we kind of package that up in a way that allows us to kind of ship weekly? So that was how we kind of made it repeatable, right? So at first you look at it, right, and it's like, oh man, that looks like so much investment. But the reality is it's actually not. The initial investment is, kind of figuring out the call it the script, right? Like just in terms of like the talking points and then the template for the video. But then the rest is just kind of, rinse and repeat. Does that kind of help?
Yeah, definitely. I think it's like you said, you got your own colleague to host, so that you didn't have to like get a paid spokesperson. So that is something that you save upon.
Yeah, there's what. Again, sorry, go ahead.
No, so he's also a subject matter expert. So I mean, you don't have to like really spend in training that particular spokesperson and things like this. It really helps.
Yeah, and the other thing we started to do, again, right, it's like, how can you do all this stuff in like as scrappy of a way as possible, right? It's a startup, it's a small team. So one of the things we also start looking at, because we do a weekly version and then we do a monthly version, which is hosted by our VP of operations. So Jordan's boss, essentially, who's like been in the industry forever, like super, super knowledgeable. But what we realized is like, man, like we should be leveraging our network of friendlies. Right. So we have friends at very senior company or friends at very at companies whose brands are much more recognizable than ours, at least for now. We're working on it, but basically pulling in those relationships. So on the monthly, we get these senior executives at very recognizable brands in our industry to join us. And, it's a win for them because they get to kind of build their own personal brand and expose our audience to their company a little bit more, right? Maybe with a little bit more nuance, but it's also a win for us because we're able to essentially associate our brand alongside some of these really major influential brands in our industry. So that's kind of another, twist to it that we do on the monthly version.
Absolutely. I think we can quickly move on to the next series. You recently launched this series for I think what was called the National Truck Driver Appreciation Week, and
Yep.
you did a bunch of them with I think representatives of a bunch of your partners.
Yep.
And then you also put that together into a nice crisp video, and I think I'm going to be playing that video before we start talking about it.
The last few weeks have been challenging. Whether you're working from home or behind the wheel,
we're all feeling the times.
But while most things in our society are at a standstill, work doesn't stop if you're a trucker. To our carriers,
thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you for carrying on business as usual in the face of uncertainty and volatility.
Keeping our shelves stocked when our country needs it the most.
And allowing Loadsmart the opportunity to make your job just a bit easier in a difficult time. Together,
we keep America running.
I love that video.
It's such a warm message for the partners who actually drive your business.
Yeah. So I can give you kind of the backstory. So there's another version, which was, or not another version, but another one, which was like Driver Appreciation Week, which I think is the next one we're going to show. But so this one was right as COVID was basically impacting the U.S., like really starting to fly across the U.S., and everything was starting to shut down, and everything was shutting down except truck drivers, right? And I think it was kind of this interesting thing where, drivers honestly aren't often recognized or appreciated at all. It's like, it's very true within our industry. I think they're kind of underappreciated. And I think, they're not even thought of as essential at times, right? But here in this moment, as the country, like literally we're trying to get, as crazy as it sounds, toilet paper on shelf stores, keeping pharmacies stocked. These guys are essential workers, and they're putting themselves in crazy situations. Like we do an interview series as well called On the Road, and we interviewed a carrier, and one of his employees decided, instead of going home to his family, right, and potentially exposing them to COVID, that he was going to just sleep in his truck for 4 months, right? So these guys are sacrificing, yet they feel underappreciated. And I think one of the things that we talked about, this was a special moment, right, to say something. And I think, and honestly, to say, I see you, like we see what you're doing. We appreciate what you're doing. And I think, there's no better way to do that than by showing the faces and the people who are actually, they work with day to day at Loadsmart. And so part of it was, like a really human, authentic, genuine way. Like that is exactly how we felt. And being able to kind of communicate that appreciation to the drivers who help support us and our customers. So that's kind of how that video came about. Definitely more brand, right? But it's one of those moments where it's like, it's an opportunity for a brand to feel authentic and human
Yes.
relative to one of their customers. And that's really what we were trying to go for.
Absolutely. I think this pandemic has forced a lot of us to change our communication. A lot of brands have been like moving away from their traditional communication strategies, and then trying to change the message that they are projecting outwards. And this is a clear example of how Loadsmart has adapted to the situation.
Totally.
And try to like put out a very genuine, warm message to the people who actually matter, right? That said, like you said, I'm just quickly going to show a few more seconds of the
Sure.
other video that you
Sorry, go ahead.
America runs on trucks. 70% of all cargo runs on a truck somewhere. I don't see trucking or intermodal being of less importance in the future. In fact, one of the great things to come out of the pandemic is trucking was recognized as an essential business and on the front line of bringing product to the American public when they were stuck at home.
They are such hard workers. Every day they are muscling 50,000 pounds of cargo to make sure that we keep this economy running. They're so essential.
I think a lot of people now know about trucking. You know, I know we got a big truck on the road, but sometimes they don't notice. They don't even look at us. But right now they know we're there.
You know, it's a hustle every single day, you know, to find what you need. We was just doing what everybody else does, right? You know what? We're getting through it.
Yeah, so Matt, I think this is a beautiful video. Again, talks about the people behind the business who are actually on the ground doing the work, while most of us have the luxury to sit at home and still continue to. These guys are putting their lives at risk, and it's genuinely appreciated when the brand which employs them actually cares about them. So I think kudos to you guys for putting out something like that.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
Quickly want to jump on to also the other aspect of using videos for two other purposes. One is talent acquisition, like employee branding. And the second is you've been doing a lot of customer stories, showing real case studies of how you and your partners like collaborate and create impact on a larger level. So genuinely, I want to know how company actually feels like investing in videos to do these things.
Yeah, totally. So I think when it comes to the talent acquisition, right, or kind of corporate branding and stuff like that, that is honestly like it's almost like low hanging fruit a little bit, and it's not a huge lift for us. It's really just telling the stories of why our employees love working at Loadsmart and why they came here, and then using that, a lot of across all of our videos, right, especially the carrier stuff, it's a lot about validation, right? Like, and it's almost like whether you're saying to a carrier, hey, we see you, or you're trying to have one employee tell a prospect employee, like, hey, I actually really like it here, right? It's all about, I think, being human, being authentic, being vulnerable, and trying to have like a connection. And video is such an awesome mechanism for that. So in terms of like investment and stuff like that, we just handle a lot of the talent acquisition stuff or the corporate branding stuff a little bit more ad hoc as needed, as opposed to like really thinking through specific campaigns, just kind of as it pops up. There's a couple, yearly milestones that we think about, like a hackathon that, that's more corporate branding that will really kind of plan out, but a lot of the rest is ad hoc. And then you brought up the other thing, right, which is, partner marketing, right? And partner marketing kind of with video. So, really this is kind of like it's partner marketing and webinar playbook, essentially, right? So essentially what we're trying to do is, part of our value is that we're integrated with all of these different transportation management systems, right? So you don't need to come to loadsmart.com. You can literally just keep using the systems you use every day. And obviously there's benefits for us too. We can see more freight, we can provide more quotes and all that good stuff. But there's a huge part of one, building awareness, building education, and then also validation. Same thing, right? Like there's a big difference between Loadsmart making an announcement that we've integrated with X platform, and and there's a press release and there's an email to our base, but that platform's never really part of the conversation, right? Like that's not, if you're a prospect and like, hey, you're telling me you have like an X, Y, and Z integration, but I haven't heard a peep from that other company, and I can't even see you've never been next to them in an email or in a blog post or in a video or a webinar. Like there's kind of a question of trust, right? So what we do is we use webinars as kind of a way to build awareness, education. It's almost like top of funnel to even through acquisition almost, right? Because what we do is our playbook is essentially, we use paid social ads to target our target accounts in the right kind of personas within those target accounts, drive them to that webinar, and then we use that webinar and recycle it like a ton. So what we do is, we'll put it on LinkedIn Live. That's kind of table stakes, right? But then we'll chop it up into different quote cards, right? So what are those meaningful quotes that a partner might have given us, which literally just happened with the last webinar we ran with Oracle. So we'll chop it up into little bite-sized quotes that are little mini movies, but are absorbable in the same way. But we still try and do the human aspect, right? We put faces in there, like we're trying to show that, like, yes, this is a real human. His name is, Chris or Lauren, right? Like we're trying to make it human.
Yeah. So I think I just mentioned that most of the times the problem to solve is about validation and social proof. Because there's lack of trust today in the society. I think I personally believe that trust is today one of the most powerful currencies that one can have in today's world. I think there's so much mistrust across the board, and especially because we can't see each other, we can't shake hands. That is going to be an even bigger problem to solve in the new normal. So I think videos can actually, because you're putting a face there, you're putting a real person in front, and as you said, you also happen to ride on larger partner audiences such as like the likes of Oracle, and you've also worked with Home Depot. Again, big brands that you can actually ride on as well.
Yeah, it's kind of interesting. So yeah, there's definitely a rising tide aspect of it, right? Where it's like, hey, if we're able, one, it provides value to like the brand that we're working with or the partner that we're working with, because we're doing some pretty genuinely cool stuff that provides value to their customers. So it makes sense from that. But we also get kind of the rising tide effect where we're able to kind of position ourselves alongside, a major brand, right? And you mentioned kind of, the Home Depot thing, really getting like validated, like public, validation, right? Or like an endorsement from a major company like that. That's very hard to do. These guys, they don't give that out easily, right? Like it's, and they also don't want to show favoritism. And I totally understand that. But again, like same thing, the way we were able to crack that a little bit was to say, okay, well, we're finding carriers to move your freight, right? And this is Driver Appreciation Week. So what better way to show that you guys see those carriers than to record a quick video just saying thanks, and we'll do all the production, we'll do all the heavy lifting. We just need you to kind of say what you want to say. And that is actually how we were able to pull that off. So like we knew the likelihood of us like getting like some formal like endorsement or something like that probably isn't like super high from a major brand like that. They just don't operate that way. But we thought like the best way to do that, or at least show some tie there, was by giving them the opportunity to thank the carriers who are moving their freight. And kudos to them, because they were kind enough to take the time out of their day to go record that message, and they're infinitely busy, especially at end of quarter. So big shout out to them too for helping us with that.
Absolutely. I think we've spoken a lot about your current role. I also want to go back to like the earlier part of your career and
Sure.
try and understand what makes Matt the guy he is today. So I think you've also been like at similar roles with the likes of Apptopia and Drift. How do you think your journey has shaped up to the current role that you're playing at Loadsmart?
Constantly learning. Honestly, constantly learning. Like even at what we're talking about now, I didn't know this. I didn't know the power of brand until I spent a short stint at Drift. Honestly, it was learning from people, like, or not even learning, like asking, like watching and understanding what they emphasized, right? Like specifically, like David Cancel. Like I remember, and granted, it's not like I had a huge stint at Drift, right? So like I'm not trying to play it up, but I remember some of the things, like it was always about faces, right? Whenever we were putting out any type of collateral, it was just about showing human faces in that collateral, and that's when I started kind of seeing like, oh, it's about kind of building connection, right? It's about building trust. Being aware of the company is not enough. They have to have some type of, emotional type connection to it. And how can you do that unless you show the people who are here? So yeah, and same thing. I'm like the folks there, they basically kind of like changed the game a bit when it comes to B2B marketing, right? Like B2B marketing used to be extremely stale. And then kind of, they brought the power of brand to it. And speaking in a way that, or writing in a way that was genuine and authentic and human, and that's that's DG. Yeah. So yeah, for me, it's like one, seeing the things that I'm not doing and then be like, oh, like, dang, like that makes a lot of sense. I wish I knew that earlier. Right. So it's kind of, and then the other way you learn is by making mistakes and doing things the wrong way. And then you kind of realize painfully like, oh, I'm not going to do that again.
Right. And I think it is also all these experiences have led like I have shaped up the way you think. I think, and I like the way you think. I think you've made some smart comments in the past, and I was just going through a few of them, and I want to bring them up and try and dig them a little bit further.
Yeah,
in a podcast that you participated earlier in, you mentioned that all marketing cannot be measured. I think this is something that a lot of thought leaders in the same space preach, whether it is Dave Gerard right now at Privy or Chris Walker from Refine Labs. They are very vocal about the part that not all marketing can be measured. And I think you also are a strong believer of the same. I want to ask you a question that how do you split your budget when it comes to marketing that can be measured and that cannot be? Because that's a question that must be like, I mean, a lot of people are hearing that, okay, all marketing should not be measured, but then how do I split my budgets? Like, what should I spend on brand? What should I spend on performance?
That's a really difficult question to answer, right? And there's probably a bunch of different methodologies. And I think part of it also depends on the people you work with, right? It's a team. It's not like I make the decision about budgets on my own, right? Like at the end of the day, it's a compromise. And I think, so my hunch is that the willingness of, a team to, set aside budget for the things that are squishy in terms of attribution is really based on, their kind of experiences, right? And, how experienced have they been working with marketers, being in marketing, stuff like that. So I guess what I'm trying to say is like, the degree to which you can kind of push budget to some of the stuff that's squishy is really dependent on kind of, I think, the team and the culture, of where you're working, right? And I'm fortunate to have work with people who, get it. So I think outside of that, though, I can kind of give, some advice. I think, the reality is, right, yes, it's your decision if you're leading marketing, right? Like at the end of the day, like what dollars go into what buckets, but you'd be an idiot if you didn't figure out how like get alignment with that and the rest of your team, right? Or the rest of the company, especially like, sales and product, right? So the way I think you can approach it is by working with them to define the budget necessary to hit kind of, the stuff that needs to be tracked, right? Like, we can go down a rabbit hole there, but stuff like, so for instance, like if I need to generate, doing the backwards funnel math, right? Where if I need to generate X customers, that means Y opportunities, Z SQLs, MQLs, and so forth, right? And then you can kind of work backwards to the budget needed to go capture that stuff. And then once you have that, then you're probably going to be left with some budget that's outside of those programs, right? And I think that is how you kind of set aside budget for the squishy stuff. And I think there's always exceptions, right? You're going to have programs that are ideas. You're like, oh man, like what if we did X, Y, and Z, right? And those are, honestly like a special pitch. I've put together many special pitches on like ideas and stuff like that on like, special projects that didn't necessarily make it into the budget. But that is how I would approach it. I think at the end of the day, it's about the culture of the teams and the people you're surrounded with, and their kind of experience working with marketers and kind of reaching that compromise where it's like, okay, we know we can't track this, but we know it's important. And then kind of, balancing that with your more kind of the budget that needs to be trackable, which is really kind of tied towards, call it lead capture and, funnel stuff.
Yeah, all the boring stuff. I mean that's like it's written down. You don't have much to experiment there. I think there are set rules that you need to follow, and what is your cost per acquisition going to be, what's your cost per
exactly.
So the actual part which can set you apart from the competitors is the other side, which is possibly like a campaign that can go viral and can possibly be a lot more or a lot higher on the return.
I can give an example.
Yeah.
I got an example for you. We literally had that exact same thought. So one of the things we did, again, this was kind of COVID times, right? Or it's still COVID, but more earlier this year when it was crazy. We did a driver giveaway. right? Where basically send us a photo of you and your truck and enter to win a gift card for $500, right? $500 in the land of marketing is not like a huge, chunk of money. It's money, but it's not a huge chunk of money. So, but because we did that, and just the soft marketing that went around that campaign, the social, the emails, we recorded videos of the driver saying thank you for receiving the award. We got free press out of that, right? So like we engaged with our carriers. Like we got so many, I think we got something like 100 selfies or something like that back. And then we also got free press out of it because of like the organic stuff we were doing around the campaign. So like that would be probably an example of what you're talking about.
I think once the word of mouth gets engineered, I think it just there's a lot of what you call buzz that gets created, and then it spreads, right?
Totally.
You cannot stop word of mouth. Good word of mouth from spreading around.
Yep. And the one other thing I was going to mention here, right? And I think I'm not going to take credit for this. This is like Wistia. I'm sure you know those guys, right? But they had maybe like 2 years ago, they had a change the channel event, right? And really they were kind of, at least in my mind, kind of at the forefront of where vendors started to pick up on like, oh, this kind of creating like video series and content and stuff like that is, like literally part of the way forward, right? And one of the things that they pointed out was, listen, like your ability to acquire customers is only going to become more costly with paid advertising, right? Like ad budgets are compounding, call it, 20% year over year, right? So like we're continuing to spend more to acquire the same people, and that's not going to change. So actually, like in the medium to long term, your most efficient lever to acquire people is through building brand and brand affinity, right? And that's kind of what we're talking about a little bit here, right? Is like in the medium to long term, your best way to acquire customers and acquire them efficiently, right, is almost to build a movement. And that's kind of, a little bit in, the ballpark of what we're talking about today.
Absolutely. I think it's amazing that you mentioned Vistia again. Love those guys.
Yeah.
I mean, a couple of years back, I happened to come across a video that they put out. Again, a very small team, and the way they hustle to get their content out. And they also happen to work on this amazing campaign called the 1-10-100 campaign.
Oh yeah, brilliant. Brilliant. It's like, it's two narratives, right? It's like the actual 1-10-100, but then the real kind of campaign is the backstory all along that. And the fact that they thought that out.
The documentary that they released was like amazing. And I hope if somebody from Vistia is watching this, or we try and get this clip across to someone from Vistia, I hope you are watching this and you come on the MOV podcast. We'd like to discuss your strategies and dissect some of your achievements here. So yeah, shout out to Vistia.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
great.
Coming back to your narrative, to your philosophy, I think also that I read in one of your previous posts is that you're of the strong opinion that the prospect has already made up their mind before they fill your form. So the targeting or any messaging that has to be done is possibly far like before they actually land on your website and possibly leave their contact details, right? Yep. So you need to start targeting, you need to start communicating to potential guys a lot early in their discovery phase.
Completely agree. I think, well, I'm saying it's my LinkedIn post, I guess. But no, what I was going to say is I think for a lot of the time, people in marketing and not even just people in marketing, but also like the company, right? Like they tend to think, not speaking about the funnel necessarily, but they tend to think of the life cycle of a lead or a prospect as beginning at the moment they fill out a form. And that is like wildly untrue, right? Like the perception that person has of your company, what you do, the value it provides, they're formulating that well before, they click on a paid ad, right, and fill out a form. And the reality is like if they formed a negative perception or they don't have a perception, they're not going to fill out the form to begin with, right? And this kind of goes back into the demand generation stuff a little bit. And I think, if your goal is to like build demand, like that has to happen before acquisition, right? Like one of the funnels I really like to think about is startup metrics for pirates, right? So it's like awareness, activation, acquisition, revenue, retention. I love that funnel, right? But most people think it starts at acquisition. Like it doesn't. So, and the problem there, right, is like exactly what we're talking about now, which is that stuff before acquisition is hard to track a lot of the times, especially with the content that's actually the most impactful, right? So you can get at some of it, right? Like through video, like depending on the platform, you can see the companies that are engaging, right? And if you're running like account-based marketing, then you can kind of correlate, oh, well, these are the companies that are engaging with video, like, and their targets. So like it gets X, Y, Z points, right? In terms of like, how marketing is kind of tracking attribution and stuff. But yeah, that's the short story. Is like people have kind of like a narrow aperture in terms of what they think the customer life cycle is. And that tends to focus marketing too much down funnel as opposed to top of funnel.
Right. I think I also want to touch upon the fact that you have an interesting background. Other than just being in marketing, you also happen to be a product manager, a director of product marketing at one of your previous roles. I want to know how does that differentiate you from other marketers, the way you think? What is that perspective that you have, which is different from someone who's possibly not seen product management, because what should you be talking about the product and what should you not be talking about?
Yeah, there's probably a few different angles there, honestly. Like, one of the things is, and I think if you're in marketing, right, you're doing, and you're really good, right, or not necessarily really good, but like you know what you're doing. Like you're doing user interviews to begin with, right? But I think user interviews become infinitely not necessarily more important. They're probably just as important in product management as they are in marketing, right? So I think one of the things that really got drilled into me in kind of doing product management, a few years ago was, the process and structure and how you kind of conduct those interviews and capture that information and translate them to product requirements. And then also kind of being able to translate, requirements from the market to engineer speak. Those are very different things, because I think, in writing like a feature spec or a product spec or something like that, it's as much about what the product should do as what it shouldn't do. So like stuff like that, it really helped. And I guess the other thing, for me, I've always been, I'm a nerd. Like I love programming. Like I taught myself Python. I'm constantly working on some half-baked idea, or something like that. But the point is like, I think, part of the reason why I went into product management was just what makes me tick is I love understanding how things work and understanding at a pretty deep technical level. So I think, that was partly why I went into that, but it's also something that I think has helped me, especially when working on more technical products, right? Like I did a little bit of big data, a little bit of predictive analytics, stuff like that. So, yeah.
Exactly. I think it makes you well suited to like market tech products. Interesting question that comes up to my mind, and I mean, the general answer that I get is, okay, all marketers think alike. But then I want to know, there should be some different DNA in a B2B marketer and a B2C marketer, right?
That's an awesome question. I don't know if it's different DNA, but they are different. Right. So like they're different and they're becoming the same. Actually, that's what's interesting. Like they're actually getting closer together, but they are still different in some ways. So they're becoming closer together in the sense that B2B brands are kind of getting their swagger, right? Like that is not something, like I've been in plenty of B2B brands where it's just like really dry, stale marketing, right? It's like solution, empower, like leverage, like stuff like that. It's just like, oh my God. But I think what you're seeing now, and for whatever reason, B2B brands were kind of afraid of showing personality, right? And I think that's changing. We spoke about Drift. Drift's a great example of that. But brands are kind of, or B2B companies are not as afraid about brand and being human, right? And actually understanding that being relatable and authentic, like actually really matters. So I think they're becoming more similar in that sense. Where I think they differ is sales, how the sale actually gets done, right? On the consumer side, a lot of products, you're not looking at a 6-month sales cycle. You're looking at something that's very transactional, and it might just be with one person who, like, literally they see a video, right? They click the video on Facebook, boom, they enter their credit card details, it's done. Whereas if you're selling, enterprise software or tech, that sales cycle will involve multiple departments, each with different, different politics, right? Different concerns, different wants, needs, and it could happen over the course of 6 months. So that's where they're a little bit different. So that's where they're kind of becoming the same, but are also still fundamentally different, I think.
Absolutely. I think that brings me to one question, which I happen to ask all my guests on the show. Why is mad over videos?
Say that again. Why am I mad over videos?
Yeah, why
Yeah.
are you mad over?
I love it. No. Why am I mad over videos? Because I think it's an incredibly cost-effective way to connect with the prospects you want to serve, right? So, like, you're not going to see building that human connection. There's no better mechanism at scale than video, and so that's number one, right? Like, just the channel, it's naturally well suited to that, and that's becoming increasingly important, right? Beyond awareness, you're trying to build affinity. To build affinity, you have to build connection between people. Video does that. The second thing I was going to say is I don't think a lot of, and this might be selfish for me, but if you're an account-based marketing shop, right, like the accounts that you're trying to target, and I don't think that ad networks have necessarily figured out how to extract every last dollar from sponsored video and stuff like that, right? So to paint an example, like we've literally run these studies where it's like, or these experiments where we can get we started to call it like $200 CPL, something like that, right, for an MQL or something like that, and then we got it down to $37. And then we ran some sponsored video experiments, right? And there were a little bit apples and oranges, right? It's not like we had lead capture on it. But what we did was, so we ran the same like sponsored video against those same kind of matched audiences on Facebook and LinkedIn. And basically, for call it 20 cents, I can have that same prospect watch a video 20 times. Yeah. It's like, so when you start to think about like why video, it's like, one, it's an incredibly effective medium, but two, depending on kind of what your model is, like, it is incredibly cost effective to get that video in front of the right eyeballs, more so than a lot of other channels. And I think, ad networks will get privy to that eventually. They probably already are, but they're still kind of figuring out how to best to monetize it. But I think it's a little bit of an arbitrage opportunity there just because it's so cost effective.
Absolutely. My last question to you for the day is, what is the advice you would give someone who's looking at marketing as a career and who's looking to maybe not looking at like marketing as an early part of his career, but then I'm talking about somebody who's trying to experiment with videos as well in his career. I mean, he could be a traditional marketer, but is not exposed to this side of things. That is my first part of the question. And the second part of the question, which I really want to know, is what kind of goals you've set for yourself in the remainder of this year at Loadsmart.
Yeah, that's a good one. Okay, so first part of the question, my advice to more kind of traditional marketers who are looking to experiment with video, couple things. Script before production, right? So more than the production value of the video, which companies can make videos look amazing, contractors can, whatever. You need to have a script that actually is authentic and human. And, especially with that first video, right? Like, we're all feeling the times, right? Like that COVID kind of carrier video. That video worked. Yeah, the production was good, but that video worked because the script was on point, right? So, like, think about the story, think about the message you are trying to say, and think about how you tell that in the most authentic human way possible, right? Then worry about production. I think that's key. And then the other thing I would say is, this stuff takes time, right? Like, you're not just going to like launch the first episode of your mini series. It's going to be perfect. And, you'll acquire a big following, stuff like that. The reality is like, it takes time to figure out what works and what doesn't. Excuse me. And then the last piece of advice on the traditional side was, what was I going to say? There was one more piece of advice I had for you guys. Oh yeah, constantly try and level up. If you're doing a series, right, one of the things that, and by the way, it's someone on my team, Aaron Roseman, who's driving this. He does a fantastic job. But like, one of the things like him and I, discuss all the time is like, how do we level up with each new episode we bring out, right? Like, whether it's the script, adding a little bit of production value, like, how do you kind of continually level yourself up? So that would be my advice to kind of the traditional, marketer who's looking to kind of get into video. And then your other question was, what was your other question again? One more time.
So I want to know what kind of goals you've set for yourself for the remainder of 2020 and the the year to come, because I don't know how long this is going to continue, like the situation that we are in. So we have to adapt. We have to come back. I think most of the companies that had stopped marketing and gone back to their shells don't realize that okay, they're losing out a lot on like communicating with their customers at this point when possibly a lot of their competitors are not. So I want to know what kind of goals you've set for yourself and the company.
Yeah. So you know, Loadsmart's growing very, very quickly, right? So part of, you know, marketing's role, right, is not even necessarily tied to the awareness stuff, right? That's just stuff we have to do. We just do. But a lot of it is kind of supporting, you know, the growth of the company, just in terms of, you know, net new customer acquisition and stuff like that. Like, that's a huge priority for us. And then we have a couple product launches along the way that, you know, obviously we need to support. But specific to kind of like, you know, a lot of what we've talked about with like video, right, and kind of awareness and, you know, activation. I think we've learned a lot in launching our series, and we're continuing to make them better. I think one of the things we're thinking about is how do we improve distribution, and then how do we also kind of give beyond just like, you know, we do, our main focus is native video, right? Like YouTube, yeah, we put them on YouTube because we have to put them on YouTube, or we should, right? But it's really native video that we care about on LinkedIn. But how can we kind of create a more of an where these videos live, but also thinking about how do we kind of create an experience around those videos, right? Like, you know, where do those videos live? Is it a Loadsmart property? What should that property have on it, right? Like, you know, I know Wistia does some stuff like this, right? Like, just in terms of like, you know, their stuff, but like those are the types of things that we are thinking about right now, just as it relates to kind of what we're doing with video.
Awesome. Thanks a lot. I think we've touched upon a lot of things today, and I think anybody who's looking at video marketing would have at least 5 different takeaways today, and I'm sure I've been taking some notes. So I think I have also a bunch of things that I'm going to be putting out after the podcast is over. And I hope I'm wishing that Loadsmart grows at like lightning pace, and hope to see you guys do a lot more videos and a lot more experiments in videos, because I think that as a creator as well as a marketer, I'm super excited when somebody is trying out a new format, somebody is trying out a different way to communicate the same thing that you see everybody else doing. So I wish you and your team the best for the future, and hope we get to like work together sometime.
I appreciate that. You know, this was a really fun conversation for me. It's a lot, you know, it's the type of stuff I really like talking about. So I really enjoyed chatting with you on it.
Awesome. So signing out this time, and hope to see you guys for the next episode of the MOV podcast. Thank you so much for tuning in. Have a great day.
Bye.